Hello again, my lovely badass black single moms. At some point, I am going to be able to say that 3 times fast without getting my tongue twisted. Good morning. Again, I wanted to just come back on here and address I don't even really honestly know all the way 1,000% how I feel about this topic, but I needed to talk about it because I think that nuance is everything, right? And so the topic that I'm interested in today is really exploring whether or not self-celebration as a black single mother is equivalent to the glorification of single motherhood. And I know in many ways this particular topic, or whether or not someone decides if a celebration of self is glorification, it's really very heavily dependent on the way in which the single mother is expressing herself, the kind of language that's being used, and also the way that society at large is looking at black single mothers. Because to a certain extent, and this is just us being 1,000% real, because that's what we're going to do on this channel, single motherhood for black women has in a certain way been glorified to a certain degree. That is not to say that it's been glorified in the way that black women are now flocking to be single mothers. But I think that the way in which we are manifesting our own destinies in the community, combined with the ways in which we're portrayed in the media, has started to communicate the idea that single motherhood is an okay or normal social status. And I am not necessarily of the viewpoint that single motherhood or single parenthood, if we're going to keep it really real, is something that we should strive towards. And this is not me pathologizing single moms, because you guys know that I love on and support single moms. But I don't believe that one individual, just whether you're a man or a woman, but since we're talking about women, let's talk about mothers. I don't believe that one mother should be responsible for the growth and development of a child or multiple children. It is simply not possible. And I'm not saying this to say that you can't be successful as a mother, as a single mother, but I am saying that it is unnaturally difficult. We are human beings, just generally. We are social creatures. Without communities and dyads and triads and families, we would not survive, literally. If you walk through your day-to-day life, just doing normal activities, cooking, cleaning, sleeping, if you really look at all the different things that you do and use throughout the day, your life is comprised of the jobs, the careers, the passions, and the perspectives of millions of people around us. I'm using this computer, I'm using this microphone, I'm using this software. I did not build these things. These things are a result of the society in which I live. So to a certain degree, whether it's a small degree or a large degree, we are all actively contributing to the day-to-day convenience of each and every other person's life. And it's the same thing when raising children. Raising a child completely by yourself in isolation, I won't say is impossible, but is extremely difficult. And I'm going to say unnaturally difficult. And I use natural with a very specific reference to it was not what nature intended. Okay, so I'm going to be really real about that. And that's not to say, hey, black single moms, you're an unnatural blight on the community. No, that's not what we're talking about here. What I'm saying is that children need community. Children need support. Children need multiple loci of support, whether that's financial support, cultural support. Oh, my mouse just died. Well, that's unfortunate. Financial support, cultural support, social support, etc. Right? So we're going to recognize the reality that single motherhood is not necessarily a situation that most people journey towards deliberately. Unless you have a lot of money and you're unmarried and you want children, and that's a separate situation. That's another podcast. But going back to the original topic, because I'm getting off topic, yet and still, even though single motherhood is not necessarily the way in which we're supposed to be raising our children, that doesn't mean that we're not allowed to celebrate our successes as single mothers. It doesn't mean that we're not allowed to acknowledge the fact that we have a job that is 1,000 times harder than raising a child with support. And if we are still able to do even a halfway decent job and still able to make strides for ourselves, that we should not celebrate those strides, whether privately or publicly or whatever. And the self-celebration of your achievements or your endurance as a single mother doesn't mean that you're necessarily glorifying single motherhood. Because glorification, just rhetorically, embedded in the meaning of glorification, means that you are deliberately training yourself, guiding yourself, and aiming towards a particular status deliberately. And once you achieve that status, you expect to be immortalized, because that status that you have achieved is considered a hallowed and very important status in the community, and that particular status creates heroes, right? And I'm just not really of the belief that most young women or even older women wake up one day and say, you know what's really gonna make my life just completely the bomb diggity? I am going to deliberately strive to be a single mom, because that is where glory lives. You know, we don't wake up screaming Sparta, running toward the, high and hallowed grounds of single motherhood. You know what I'm saying? I don't know any women who are doing that. And I will put out there that I am very careful about how I curate my circle. Okay, so maybe I'm not experiencing these single mothers who are getting up and deliberately trying to become single moms, but my guess is that most of us don't wake up trying to achieve this superhuman status. Okay, there are other things that we like to do with our lives, other ways in which we like to spend our time, goals that we have to achieve that I believe are more first and foremost in our psyches, right? So to say that self-celebration is the glorification of motherhood, I think is a reach. I really think is a reach. Now, this is not to say that some single moms out here, some of us, wonderful black single moms out here, occasionally are not a bit delusional about the, how do I even say this? It's not to say that we're not, some of us are not delusional about the chances of success of whatever we're trying to achieve, when also bearing on your hip 2 or 3 kids. I do think to a certain extent, to a pervasive extent, if we're going to be really honest, the strong black single woman stereotype has been taken to the extreme. And this is for single mothers and for childless women, okay? Because I think both groups of women struggle with the idea that we have to be strong and superhuman, and that we can't just be essentially rested in our feminine energy. We can't rest in, being vulnerable. We can't rest in just being delicate. I think many of us, whether we have children or not, feel as though we have to strive for strength and strive to be, sort of like a Wakanda level type of warrior woman. And that we do, as a group, black women in general, do emphasize our achievements over our femininity. And we'll talk about feminine and masculine energies and, how black women and single black mothers can still rest in the feminine, while they're also doing, the very quote unquote masculine tasks of leading a household, right? Which is by necessity, not by desire. And we'll talk about those things in a different podcast. But I would say that the glorification of our achievements is a thing that happens for both black single mothers and black childless women. And there are some problems with that. There are some contentions and some pitfalls of those things. But that's not something that rests solely on the shoulders of black single mothers. That's some stuff that we have been dealing with throughout the 400 years that we have been in this country, throughout slavery, throughout Jim Crow, throughout, then the crack epidemic in the 80s and to now, where black women are basically outshining the men in the community with our degrees. And, we're the ones who are the most likely to start black businesses, even though the men, statistically, who have good jobs and have good careers make more money. But when you look at numbers, just sheer numbers of black women with degrees and black women with businesses versus the black men who actually have businesses and actually have good careers, the numbers are still in our favor in terms of the multitude of women who are able to achieve those successes versus the actual amount of money that the smaller number of men are actually able to make. And we'll talk about all of those things. Like, I have a podcast coming up called The Facts of Single Motherhood, and this is where we get really real about the disadvantages, the social and economic disadvantages of single motherhood and the impact it has on black single mothers. But by facing those facts, we can then move forward to do something better. So we'll talk about all those things. But back to glorification versus self-celebration. I think that, again, it's about nuance. As a single mother personally, I don't sit back and say, you need to be a single mom like me, because being a single mom, you can still achieve A, B, C, and D like me. You need to get like me. I have never once said that or even thought that in my entire life. The entire purpose of self-celebration is to understand that despite the fact that you might be at a socioeconomic disadvantage, you are still able to achieve the same things that other women can achieve. And that is supposed to be a point of encouragement and a point of, and basically it's supposed to be something that's used to help you look towards a brighter future, so that you don't think that your entire life is destroyed and useless just because you have a child, either out of wedlock or by yourself, whether in wedlock or out of wedlock. Those points of self-celebration are supposed to be beacons of hope. They're not supposed to be used as the standard for the black community. And so I really need black single moms to really get that through their heads. And I also need the black community in general to get it through your heads, that just because I can, sit on a stage with a baby on my hip or whatever and get my law degree and have a photo op with that, it doesn't mean I'm saying, hey, you guys, black single motherhood is the shits, like black single motherhood is the place to be, because you can still do everything you want to do and also have a baby out of wedlock. So you go have those babies out of wedlock. Nobody is saying that. Okay. But what you're not going to do is tell us that we should not celebrate the fact that we are still able to make strides in spite of the fact that we have these socioeconomic weights on us that eat into our money, our time, our energy. No one is trying to get you to celebrate along with us, but just kind of don't begrudge single black moms of their moments to shine. Like, why do we have to earn our moments to shine? Why can't we just take them? And why can't we just celebrate self as we are? Because we're not on the shoulda, woulda, coulda train anymore. We are Black single mothers. This is how it is. We can't change it. So instead of going through life apologizing for being here, we're going to go through life celebrating the various successes that we have, in spite of the fact that people are expecting us to fail. And this is not supposed to be a lesson to our younger generation that this is what's normal. This is what should be normal. We're not saying that. What we are saying is that, you know what? I'm in unusual circumstances, but I'm also able to do extraordinary things. And I don't think that saying that and celebrating self means that we're glorifying single motherhood or that we want to struggle. Now, I can't speak for all of us because, again, the identification with struggle is something that Black women as a whole, regardless of whether we have kids or not, or regardless of whether we have kids, is something that I think we need to deprogram ourselves of as a whole. I do believe that Black women, again, as I said before, because we're not celebrated for our beauty and our femininity, we're not celebrated for our delicacy and the way in which we can elevate a man's social status. Okay, we're not celebrated for those things because we're not seen as social status elevators. We are seen and cast as mules. Okay, and so that's not to say that there isn't an issue in the community where we glorify struggle, because that's really all Black women have is our strength. I mean, that's not all we have, but that's all we're seen as being useful for. And I do believe that we should be striving to change that, because we are not here to bear the burdens of the entire community and be the mules of the world. We're not going to do that anymore. But for those of us who are already here and already in our positions of single motherhood, don't begrudge us our moment in the spotlight to shine, and I think that some of the critiques of self-celebration for single mothers, I understand, because Black childless women are thrown right into the same pot with Black single moms. And Black women are so desperate for a win. We are so desperate for a come up because we're at the bottom socially, that we are willing to step on anyone and anything in order to get even the slightest come up. And that includes other women. So when you realize that like your sexual value and your social value is higher than a Black single mother's sexual and social value, you're going to take that opportunity to be like, oh, I'm not like those baby mamas. Look at me, pick me. I am the paragon of what a good Black woman looks like. They're not the good ones. Okay, we're going to distinguish ourselves from the Black single mothers, and we are the good Black women of the community. Which again, I find laughable, but I also find understandable and realistic, right? We're going to work in realism here. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that we don't, as Black single moms, regardless of what you think about us, that we don't have the right to celebrate self. And this whole sort of perspective that the community takes on us, is damaging and unfortunate, but I do also understand it. I understand the desperate desire to be seen as valuable. I understand the desperate desire to be chosen. I understand the desire to be distinguished. I understand what it's like to be automatically assumed that you aren't anything, that you're not worth anything simply because you're Black or simply because you're a single mother. And I understand the desperate scramble to distinguish yourself from a group of undesirable women. I understand that. But just because you are having a low self-esteem or low confidence about your status as a Black woman in the world at large, that doesn't mean that Black single moms the world over need to stop celebrating themselves, okay? Because you don't want to look bad on a social level, okay? I do agree that protecting our image as a whole is important. And I think that Black single mothers are still trying to find a way to educate the future about what kinds of decisions they should be making without denigrating ourselves as individuals, without living in the past bad decisions that we've made. I think Black single moms are consistently trying to walk that line. And that's something that we are trying to figure out and define for ourselves. And a part of figuring out how we're going to define ourselves, how we're going to uplift ourselves, but also encourage our children to do better is by saying, yes, I'm a single mom, but I am still a bad bitch. And if y'all have a problem with that, that's too bad. You know, if you're worried about Black single mothers being the face of Black womanhood, I get it. But then you need to take responsibility in whatever way that you have to do for yourself to elevate the Black female image in your own way without having to denigrate our image. Okay. I think the entire Black community should be concerned with how every segment of the community is portrayed. I think Black men need to be extremely concerned with how they're allowing rappers and athletes to portray them. Because they get a lot of, hype for having, Black sexy masculinity, but no one thinks of Black men and thinks of the future engineers and doctors of the world. I'm just keeping it real. Honestly, Black single mothers don't necessarily have that problem. Of course, people have their ideas about Black single moms in terms of the decisions that we've made, and yes, there is a large portion of us that still suffers from the ghetto stereotype. But if you see how Black single moms are being portrayed in the media, you guys can say whatever you want about us being irresponsible with our wombs, but we're being shown as owning businesses. We are being shown as being CEOs. We are being shown as being like high-powered career women, lawyers, doctors. I mean, the only real social stigmas that we suffer from still, and which are very real, are when looking at different segments of the Black community and checking out the lower, quote unquote, lower socioeconomic single moms versus the higher socioeconomic single moms. That's still a real stereotype. And, it can be very confusing. They're competing stereotypes. You have the welfare mom stereotype, but then you also have the badass Black single mom stereotype who's owning businesses and shit. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, on an objective scale, looking at how we are being perceived by the larger world, the tide is kind of changing, and that's not to say, hey, we're superior to you. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying when people look at Black single moms, they don't necessarily automatically have to swing to the ghetto stereotype anymore, because we have a large segment of our population really just doing the damn thing. And for Black childless women, in terms of your career aspirations and educational growth, you guys are really looking really great on that tip. So, and again, I'm not saying it's all rainbows and sunshine, because this is our womanhood being defined by our achievements, which is a very masculine definition. Okay, let's be real about that. So we do have some work to do when it comes to looking at how Black femininity can be celebrated and lauded just as much as the Black masculinity, the Black masculine female. We still do need to look at those things. That's very real. But, I just getting back to the original point, man, I need to make these shorter, because I just need to just get to it. Getting back to the original point, I don't believe at all that Black single mothers as a whole are trying to glorify Black single motherhood. Nobody gets up and strives to be a Black single mom because that's what we believe is the highest status in our community. I think it's more about self-celebration, self-love, and self-appreciation, despite the fact that we have it a lot harder socioeconomically. And if you have a problem with that, I'm sorry, but you need to be responsible for your own image, just like we're trying to take control of our image. And again, this is me talking about Black single mothers in the present. I'm not saying that we should continue to produce more and more Black single moms. I'm not saying that. But again, the point of this channel is to work with what we have, and to not continue to wag the finger at the Black single moms that are already here, but to help them navigate the lives that we already have in the present, and to be in the present and to continue to do better in the future. So what we need to do right now, for all you Black single moms that are out there right now, yeah, you do need to celebrate yourself, because you need to plan for your own survival, because nobody else is planning for your own survival. You need to fill your own cup, because nobody else is filling your cup. So if you want to take a selfie of, with you and your 4 or 5 kids, whatever, I don't care how it looks to other people. And you're in your cap and gown and they are around you, supporting you and loving on you, and you have been able to get your doctoral degree or your graduate degree, your law degree, whatever you're getting, even if it's just your bachelor's, take that picture, post it to social media, and write an inspiring message, because you never know who's looking. You might have had a Black single mom who is in despair and who is despondent, who needs encouragement and support, who needs to see that her future is not completely lost just because she doesn't have a man around to take care of her kids with her. Okay? Not all of us are little ghetto boos who opened our legs for thugs and, D-boys and got left. Some of us are the wives of fallen soldiers. Some of us are widows. Some of us are women who had, a really wonderful marriage and who is going through divorce. There's a myriad of different kinds of Black single mothers, and just because everyone else is afraid of looking ghetto, or is afraid of the welfare mom stereotype, that doesn't mean that you should not celebrate yourself and your achievements, because there are a lot of women who don't fall into those ghetto stereotypes, who still need encouragement, who had no control over the fact that things didn't work out, or their husband passed away, or there was something going on and she needed to leave that situation. Okay, there are so many different situations for single mothers out there. Each one of our stories is unique, and we can't keep holding the burden of the Black community's image on our shoulders. Everybody in our community is responsible for maintaining our image, period. Okay? We can't hide. We should not have to hide in the darkness just because we're trying to make everybody else who doesn't give a fuck about us look good. Like, I'm not really about that. I'm not about the glorification of single motherhood. But I'm not going to say you should not celebrate yourself as well, because you never know who's watching. And if all we do as Black single moms is sit around and feel sorry for ourselves because that's what the community demands of us, if all we do is, say, what, I'm a single mom now, I ain't shit, and roll over and die, what kind of example is that setting for our children? What kind of life is that for us to live personally? Okay, just because we're in this situation doesn't mean that we don't deserve love, that we don't deserve self-love, and that we don't deserve to celebrate our achievements. So you keep snapping those selfies, you keep writing your inspirational stories, you keep doing the damn thing, and let everybody else worry about how the Black community is looking to the rest of the world. Okay, so that's all I really have to say on this topic. This was a long video, sorry about that, but I just needed to get that out there because I see a lot of hateration around graduation time on these moms who are literally doing more than the single childless people in our community, a lot of them, but are still being hated on just because they had a child out of wedlock, or their husband has passed away, or they don't have a man in the household to take care of their kids. Like, we just need to kind of chill out and stop hating on each other and just uplift each other. So that's all I have to say. Keep loving yourselves, keep striving towards greatness, and keep being badass. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.